Imagine someone grabbing your face, forcing your eyes open, and shouting, "Look at the sun, it's beautiful, why are you resisting?" Technically, they're showing you light. Practically, they're blinding you. That's what enlightenment without consent can feel like. In spirituality, therapy, coaching, psychedelics, even online red pill culture, there's a hidden assumption. If a truth is deep enough, good enough, or urgent enough, it justifies pushing people into it. We call it awakening, deconditioning, becoming woke, or seeing through the matrix. But when there's pressure, manipulation, or emotional blackmail, it's not awakening. It's intrusion. In this video, we're going to unpack the quiet violence of forced enlightenment, how it harms nervous systems, fractures identities, and creates lifelong distrust of anything spiritual. We'll explore where this shows up in everyday life and how to build a model of awakening that actually honors boundaries, timing, and choice, yours and everyone else's. Enlightenment sounds beautiful. Peace, clarity, compassion, liberation. But there's a side we rarely talk about. When someone else decides it's time for you to wake up, whether you're ready or not. Maybe a guru tells you your pain is just ego and to drop it. A partner insists you raise your frequency whenever you're upset. A friend shoves you into a plant medicine ceremony you're terrified of, saying, "Trust the medicine." Or a creator online red pills you with shocking content, mocking anyone who isn't awake yet. In this video, we'll explore what enlightenment without consent really is, how it hides inside spiritual communities, coaching, activism, and internet culture, and, most importantly, how to protect yourself and others from it. If you're interested in spirituality but also care about boundaries and mental health, stay with me until the end. And if you find this valuable, consider subscribing and hitting the bell so you don't miss future deep dives like this. Let's define enlightenment without consent. I'm not talking about spontaneous mystical experiences that arise naturally. I'm talking about situations where someone claims access to higher truth or superior awareness. They frame your doubts or boundaries as ego, programming, or resistance. They actively push you toward their version of awakening, using authority, shame, urgency, or belonging as leverage. The key ingredient is this: your full, informed, emotionally coherent yes is missing. Consent isn't just you showed up to the retreat or you clicked play on the video. Consent means you understand the risks, the intensity, the possible destabilization, and you have the ongoing freedom to slow down, say no, or step back without punishment or ridicule. Enlightenment without consent is when spiritual, psychological, or ideological insight is imposed faster, deeper, or harsher than your system can safely integrate. It's less like opening a window, more like ripping the roof off during a storm. Why does readiness matter so much in spiritual or psychological growth? Because awakening isn't just about ideas, it's about your nervous system, your history, your relationships, and your sense of self. If you've experienced trauma, abandonment, or unstable environments, insight can land like an earthquake. Realizing I am not my thoughts might be liberating for one person, but for someone whose reality has always been denied, it can feel like further dissociation. Being told nothing is real when you fought to trust your own perceptions can be shattering. Readiness means your system has enough safety and support to metabolize new truths. You can question beliefs without losing your footing. You can feel intense emotions without drowning. When teachers ignore readiness, they mistake shock for awakening and collapse for surrender. A good question to ask is, does this pace respect my nervous system, or is it treating me like a project that needs to be fast-tracked? One common form of enlightenment without consent is spiritual bypassing, using spiritual ideas to skip over messy human reality. It sounds like, "Don't be angry, that's low vibration. Your trauma is just a story, drop it. If you were truly awake, this wouldn't bother you." On the surface, it points toward peace. Underneath, it tells you your feelings, history, and boundaries are obstacles that should be transcended, not heard. When someone pushes you to get over it in the name of enlightenment, they're not helping you wake up. They're asking you to abandon yourself faster. That can fragment your psyche and deepen shame. Now you're not just hurting, you're also failing spiritually. Healthy awakening goes through emotion, body, and history, not around them. It might include forgiveness, surrender, and perspective, but only when those arise from within, at your pace, instead of being imposed as a spiritual requirement to belong or be advanced. Forced insight can be experienced as trauma, even when the content is spiritual. Imagine having your core beliefs ripped away in a weekend, or being pushed into dissolving your identity in a ceremony you barely understood. That kind of psychic speed can overwhelm the brain and body. Symptoms might look like panic, derealization, nothing feels real, emotional numbness, insomnia, or sudden distrust of everyone, including yourself. Yet in many spiritual circles, these are labeled Kundalini awakening, ego death, or purging, and pressure is applied to push through instead of slow down. Trauma isn't only what happens, it's what happens without enough support. When big realizations land in a relational vacuum or in a context that blames you for struggling, they can freeze into terror. Enlightenment without consent often leaves people spiritually homeless, unable to go back to their old worldview, but too flooded to inhabit the new one. Integration, not intensity, is what makes awakening truly transformative. Where there's enlightenment without consent, there's usually a power imbalance. Gurus, therapists, coaches, charismatic leaders, anyone placed on a pedestal can easily slide from guidance into coercion. It sounds like, I see your true nature better than you do. Your resistance is your ego fighting back. If you leave, you'll fall back into unconsciousness. These dynamics weaponize dependence and belonging. The teacher becomes gatekeeper of your enlightenment, and your doubts are rebranded as spiritual failure. Coercion doesn't always look dramatic. It can be a subtle eye roll when you set a boundary, withdrawing affection when you question teachings, or oversharing intimate downloads about your psyche that you never asked for. The core issue: your inner authority is quietly replaced with theirs. Consent-based awakening, by contrast, centers your discernment. A healthy teacher might say, here's what I see. How does that land for you? And genuinely respect your no, your pacing, and your right to leave entirely. Psychedelics and plant medicines are powerful tools for insight and prime territory for enlightenment without consent. A substance can catapult you into non-dual states, relive trauma, or dissolve your identity in minutes. That's not inherently bad, but without real consent and support, it can be devastating. Red flags include pressure to take a higher dose than you want, facilitators dismissing your fear as ego, being told you're blocking the medicine if you hesitate, no thorough screening for mental health, medications, or trauma. People come out of these experiences with shattered worldviews, resurfaced abuse memories, or ongoing derealization, and are told it's just integration. They need to tough out alone. An ethical psychedelic space treats consent as ongoing. You can lower your dose, opt out, or stop mid-ceremony. Your no is sacred, not a problem to solve. Enlightenment that rips through your psyche without that respect may give you visions, but it can also leave invisible scars. Enlightenment without consent isn't only spiritual, it shows up in activism and woke culture too. Think of being bombarded with graphic videos, rage-filled threads, or complex theory you're shamed for not already knowing. The intention is often good. People need to wake up to injustice. The method, though, can be violent to the psyche, especially for marginalized folks already living the reality being showcased. Signs of forced awareness. If you're not constantly consuming this content, you're complicit. If this doesn't devastate you, you're part of the problem. Public dogpiling as moral education. Moral urgency is real. Systems do enormous harm. But sustainable change requires nervous systems that aren't perpetually in collapse. Consent here looks like content warnings, opt-in education, room for questions without instant shaming, respect for people's capacity and bandwidth. Awakening to injustice matters, but when awareness is enforced through overwhelm and humiliation, we reproduce the very domination we claim to oppose. On a personal level, enlightenment without consent often looks like fixing the people we love. You read a book, do a retreat, heal some pattern, and suddenly you can see everyone else's blocks, right? So you start suggesting meditations for your partner whenever they're upset, diagnosing your parents' trauma at dinner, sending unsolicited long voice notes about your friend's attachment style. You may mean well, but if they didn't ask, it's invasive. You're relocating them from equal human to project in your mind. Relational consent means asking, are you open to feedback or suggestions? And believing them if they say no. It means letting people be beautifully, frustratingly themselves, even if you think you see a shortcut to their enlightenment. Paradoxically, the more you truly respect others' timing and autonomy, the safer they feel around you. And safety, not pressure, is what actually invites genuine curiosity and change. Online, enlightenment without consent often appears as red pill culture, content designed to violently shatter your worldview. Conspiracy channels, extreme ideology pipelines, and some self-help spaces all use the same pattern. 1. Everything you've been told is a lie. 2. Only a few of us see the truth. 3. If you're offended or scared, that proves you're still asleep. Shock is used as a recruitment tool. Your confusion and fear get framed as evidence that the message is powerful and necessary. Leaving isn't just changing your mind, it's going back to sleep. This is enlightenment as psychological capture. There is no room for slow digestion, nuance, or partial agreement. It's all or nothing awakening. Healthy truth-telling leaves your agency intact. You can explore ideas, step away, take time, disagree. If a creator treats your distress as proof they're right, and your hesitation as weakness, you're not being awakened, you're being conditioned. There's also a cultural layer. Enlightenment without consent often echoes colonial patterns. Western seekers entering indigenous traditions sometimes demand instant access to sacred ceremonies, medicines, and knowledge, assuming their personal awakening justifies bypassing community boundaries. Similarly, Eastern philosophies get stripped of context and sold as quick hacks, non-dual awakening in one weekend. Tantra for better sex, shamanic journeying for business success. The wisdom is extracted. The relational, ethical container is ignored. Here, consent isn't just individual, it's collective. Do the communities who steward these practices want them used this way? Were they asked, credited, compensated? Are their cautions respected or dismissed as old paradigm thinking? A decolonized approach to awakening slows down. It listens more than it consumes, lets know be sacred even when you're spiritually curious, and recognizes that not all knowledge is owed to us just because we're eager to grow. How do you spot when awakening is drifting into non-consensual territory? A few guiding questions. Is my discomfort being explored with curiosity, or instantly labeled ego or resistance? Do I feel freer and more myself over time, or more dependent and confused? Are my boundaries met with respect, or with pressure, disappointment, or spiritual explanations? Also notice the tempo. Coercive spaces often glorify speed. Lifetime of therapy in one session. Instant enlightenment. Mass awakening now or never. Your hesitations are framed as a threat to the mission. Consent-based awakening is slower and humbler. Doubt is welcome. Leaving is honored. Teachers admit limits and refer out to therapists or other supports when needed. Most importantly, your inner no is treated as intelligent, not as a flaw to crush. If you can't say no safely, you can't truly say yes, and without a real yes, there is no authentic enlightenment, only performance. Let's distill this down. Enlightenment without consent happens whenever someone's idea of waking you up overrides your timing, your nervous system, or your clear no. It can look spiritual, therapeutic, activist, psychedelic, or purely ideological, but the core is the same. Your experience is subordinated to a mission. We saw how. Spiritual bypassing dismisses real pain as low vibration. Forced insight can land as trauma, not liberation. Power imbalances with gurus, coaches, and leaders enable subtle coercion. Psychedelics, activism, red pill culture, and cultural appropriation all carry unique risks when consent is thin. A healthier model of awakening is trauma-informed, slow, and relational. It centers integration over intensity, questions over certainty, and your inner authority over anyone's agenda. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Any path that can't tolerate your boundaries is not worthy of your deepest trust, no matter how enlightened it claims to be. If this resonated, let it be more than interesting. Let it be permission. Permission to slow down on your path, to question teachers, practices, and content that feel like too much, too fast, to listen when your body says, not now, and trust that as wisdom, not weakness. You're allowed to want awakening and safety, depth and boundaries, mystery and mental health. Those aren't opposites. They're the conditions for real transformation. If you'd like more long-form, nuanced explorations of spirituality, psychology, and power, you can support this work by subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you actually see new episodes. It genuinely helps this kind of slower, consent-centered content reach people who need it. I'd also love to hear your experience. Have you ever felt pushed into insight you weren't ready for? What helped you reclaim your pace? Share in the comments. Your story might be someone else's lifeline.